Morning, friends. This is a sermon about radical hospitality. Until recently, I served as a chaplain at Hospice Savannah. A hospice chaplain is called to be with families in their grief. I once stood between two family factions, trying to get them to talk to one another. My coworkers always laughed about that incident, how I almost got punched out. And that wasn't the only time. That happened a few times. For you can imagine that people get pretty angry sometimes in their grief when they're trying to work out for themselves how in the world they're going to get along without their loved one. I visited my first patient with a fellow chaplain who played old hymns on his dulcimer. Listening, people remember their earliest years when those traditional hymns soothed their souls. It wasn't the words as much as it was the feelings that came out, hearing music that catapulted them to a place where words could not speak. The power of music and memory. I recall visiting one patient in their room at home alongside a music therapist. The patient opened up about their relationship with their wife, how they first met, and then his memories as a soldier in the war, the atrocities he'd seen, how they were with him still. Often what the dying need is someone listening with an active ear, inclined towards others. I also remember when chaplains baptized someone, the one thing that they wanted at the end of their life. So we did it. The patient got into the tub, the spa tub right down from their room, and the family and the staff gathered around as they were baptized. It was incredibly powerful. But most of all, I remember my Black coworkers, the social workers, the dietitian, the chaplains. They were patient with this white chaplain, exemplifying grace beyond anything I could imagine, welcoming me, a relative newcomer, to Savannah. And to be honest with you, I miss them, I think, most of all during this pandemic. Roughly 1,500 years ago, Saint Benedict created the rule of order for his monasteries. The rule was intended to extend hospitality to the stranger, to care for the poor. Anyone who knocked on the doors of the hermitage could receive care and hospitality. Saint Benedict's rule aspired to the hospitality of Jesus. And the Hebrew Bible, that has innumerable passages about kindness to strangers, care for the poor, the widows, the orphans, strangers in your land. This radical hospitality has been at the core of Christianity and Judaism at their best as long as they've existed. And Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists come from these roots. On July 4th weekend, we celebrate this country's vision of equality with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the idea that governments are instituted, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Seems a far cry from these times now. The promises in the Declaration of Independence, which school children learn and memorize from the youngest of ages, has not been fully realized, though it's often held up. It's time to look at the notion of radical hospitality aspired to in our Constitution, not fully realized, and commit to making those inalienable rights. inalienable rights for everyone? Can we live into the promise of America that has not cared for all of its citizens with equal concern and equal care? In our charge to our elected leaders, we ask them, in charge to our elected leaders at this church, we ask them to guide us in addressing systemic racism, sexism, classism, LGBTQI folks, oppression, human rights, all those intersecting kinds of oppressions. And to me, that is a true July 4th celebration, not only lifting up the parts we enjoy telling ourselves about this country, but telling the whole story, making it plain, remembering Frederick Douglass's stirring words about what to the slave is the 4th of July. He said centuries ago now, I answer a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross inequities and cruelty to which he is constant victim. End quote. And my friends, that is still true in so many ways, in so many ways. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, verses 23 to 24, Jesus says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and the Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, cumin, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former." As much as we want to be on the right side of justice, it's hard for most white Americans to hear the words of Frederick Douglass. It's hard to know about Jesus and the prophets of the Hebrew Bible that spoke about these things millennia before our common understanding of justice and what faith calls us to do. It's not easy to live up to radical hospitality as practiced by those early Benedictines who welcomed and cared for the stranger. It's not easy because we often feel vulnerable and frightened. What will it mean to be radically hospitable and revolutionary even in our love for others? What will we have to give up? What about providing sanctuary to those who are a meal and a paycheck away from homelessness or fear deportation and separation from their families? It's messy to show radical hospitality. I would dare say it doesn't come naturally to us, though we are caring and compassionate people. Our own fears, particularly now with COVID-19, show up front and center. I know this sounds kind of hopeless, but I don't believe that it is. I believe in my core that I imagine is your core too, that we can show mercy and compassion, that we can call out the government leaders who would let people of color fall prey to COVID-19, would let the unemployed be evicted from their apartments. Who would let government leaders not take care of the people when they don't even have a safety net during a pandemic. That's not following the life of Jesus, although they espouse that it is. The teachings of Jesus are to show love and compassion and care